Thank you, President.
Mr. President, Ukraine consistently supports the Middle East peace process and the principle of a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine coexisting in peace and security. The lack of a direct dialogue and an almost non-existent political process create an extremely unpredictable and explosive situation. This deteriorating trend has unfortunately become a new normal, thus making an agreement on the basis of a two-state solution ever more elusive. On this point, we have to state clearly that one of the strongest drivers contributing to today's status quo is the Israeli settlement policy. The announcement on October the 5th of Israel's intention to build 300 housing units and to establish an industrial zone in the West Bank is a clear signal of further intensification of settlement activities. Linking a string of outposts in the West Bank that would effectively divide it will undermine and potentially even ruin Palestinian state-building efforts. This is yet another hard blow to the peace process. But terror is not an answer either. Ukraine strongly condemns the shooting that took place on the 8th of October in Jerusalem's Ammunition Hill, resulting in Israeli casualties. We are deeply concerned by a vicious circle of escalation that we constantly witness. The often repeated pattern of attacks and counterattacks demonstrates that the status quo is a road to nowhere. We strongly believe that the Israeli side must demonstrate a genuine restraint and refrain from a disproportionate use of force that could only stir up the violence and lead to increased casualties, whereas the Palestinian side must condemn any crime and violent assault perpetrated by Palestinians against Israelis and apply all possible efforts to prevent them. The lack of progress on this track will only play into extremist hands, who stand to win from a collapse of the peace process. Thus, stopping violence and de-escalating the situation is an immediate priority. Ukraine reiterates its position that in elaborating a workable Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement, relevant provisions of respective UN Security Council resolutions, the Madrid principles, including Land for Peace, the roadmap, the agreements previously reached by the parties, and the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative must be respected. Mr. President, Middle East is ablaze, suffering from deep and entrenched conflicts, tearing region apart and posing a grave danger for the wider international security system. The conflict in Syria continues to spiral out of control, despite all the efforts of most of these Council members and those of the wider international community. The conflict settlement mechanism that was built during the last 12 months has failed to bring the desired result in Syria. The dramatic Security Council session on October the 8th and a predictable but nevertheless deeply disappointing fifth use of veto by the Russian Federation testify to the bankruptcy of the veto right. Outside the UN framework, the ISSG platform and the entire Vienna process have not provided a necessary breakthrough either. As a result, we are practically back to square one. We believe that only a full implementation and adherence to the word and spirit of the 2012 Geneva Communiqué and Resolution 2254 can lead to the settlement of the conflict in Syria. Moving on to other regional threats, there is no question regarding the urgent need to put an end to the violence in Yemen. The continued lack of progress of the intra-Yemeni political process is deeply troubling. In this regard, we highly value the efforts by Kuwait and other mediators who are constantly trying to bring about peace. Taking note of the special envoy announcement of a nationwide cessation of hostilities for an initial period of 72 hours, we call on the parties to resume direct talks without preconditions. Finally, Mr. President, on the spread of terrorism, Ukraine is fully committed to eradicating ISIL as a global threat. We are encouraged by the substantial progress achieved by the coalition against ISIL in Iraq and Syria in the last couple of months. The operation to liberate Mosul has a special significance given this city's strategic importance. We hope that liberation of Mosul will become a turning point in degrading and ultimately destroying Daesh. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to underline that without a clear way out of the multiple crises that are tearing apart the Middle East, particularly those in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, coupled with the continuing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it will be impossible to contain the growing threat of violent extremism and the global spread of terrorist groups, as well as to put an end to the continuing flow of refugees from the region. I thank you.